Hi everyone, my name is Lydia Menestrella, and my presentation today is going to be on cooking in the wilderness. So the things that we're going to discuss in today's presentation is first preparing for your trip by means of the supplies that you'll want to bring, the different methods of cooking in the wild, whether that be over an open fire or through another heat source, how and what to cook in different weather conditions such as snow or extreme heat, helpful tips when cooking, and then most importantly, the hazards and proper safety precautions to take to make sure that you are being safe when cooking. So to begin with supplies, I compiled this list of the most essential items that I feel are important to bring if you plan on cooking in the wilderness. After this, obviously, your supplies is going to depend on where you're traveling, how long you're going to be gone for, how many people are going to be in your group, and so on. But I think that these items are probably what you would want to make sure that you have before considering anything else. If you notice, I bolded things like pot holders and meat thermometers just because these are safety precautions that you would be taking by bringing these to prevent burns, and then also to make sure that your food is cooked through thoroughly so that no one in your group gets sick, because obviously, as Chrissy said, we want to make sure that we are not creating a situation where anyone could get sick or hurt. Other than that, things like a camping stove and fuel, or a lighter and fire starter if you plan on doing an open fire, those are obviously going to be your source of heat and cooking the food. Other than that, you'll probably want sharp knives to be able to cut vegetables and meat, and things like pots and pans to be able to actually cook over the fire, so that you don't always have to use an open flame. So there are several methods obviously to cooking in the wilderness, but if you're not planning to use a campfire, these are the four probably most convenient and effective means of cooking your food. The first would be a propane stove. These are the most commonly used, as propane is something that would power your grills at home. It's also the safest option because it doesn't emit any harmful gases usually. It is important to make sure that you have enough fuel and that there are no leaks, but other than that, it's a pretty safe option. There's also a butane stove, which is just another type of liquid heat that you're going to be using, but it's pretty much the same as a propane stove. As far as grilling, if you are going to a campsite, there might be grills on hand, and that's important to ask about prior to leaving for your trip. You can also buy a portable grill. They're pretty heavy though, so it would definitely not be an option that you would want to consider for if you were hiking the Appalachian Trail, for example, or going on a very long endurance kind of hike or camp trip. It's definitely something that you would want for like a weekend in Assateague, for example. And then you would need a lighter or matches, and then charcoal, propane, or wood chips as your source of keeping the heat going. And then this last one I thought was just kind of interesting. It's thermos cooking. So all you really need is boiling water, and obviously you would need that from a fire, but the actual cooking of your meal would get done in the thermos when you put something like rice or oatmeal into the thermos along with boiling water, and then just let it sit for about 10 or 15 minutes, and you have a hot meal waiting for you. Obviously, because thermoses are so small, this would be something that you would want if you were traveling alone, but it's still an option nonetheless. Moving on to cooking over an open fire, which is what I'm sure a lot of you would want to do because that's kind of one of the fun aspects of going camping. You first need to consider the things that you're going to need to build an effective fire, such as wood. And you can't always count on there being wood at wherever you're going to put up site because it could be raining or snowing, and that means that the wood's going to be wet or rotten and it won't catch fire well. So you just want to make sure that you're planning on bringing the right fuel, and you also want, if you're cooking directly over a fire, using something like a grill grate, wood that's going to be able to break down into smaller coals so that there's not as big of a flame. It's just kind of a slow, like rolling fire. So a grill grate is something that sits directly on top of the fire. It's literally a grill rack that you would see if you opened up your grill at home. You want it over a low fire, and then the food can be applied directly, such as if you were skewering meat or vegetables, and then it could also be in pots or pans over the fire. It's just a nice way to separate the fire from the pots and pans themselves, but it's super easy and very lightweight. You could also put your food into aluminum packets. I know that Chrissy said in class one day that she does that with sweet potatoes, and there's so many foods that you can just roll up in a packet, make sure that it's securely closed. And then for this, you want hot coals, so you don't necessarily want a flame because the food will burn. But if you have coals that are still warm but not a big fire, you can just throw them in, and then within half an hour to an hour, you're going to have a hot meal. You can also get a Dutch oven, and this is something that can literally sit directly in the fire. It's a very dense material, and you can put pretty much any food in there. I know that a lot of people put stews in there, they bake biscuits in it. But the thing about a Dutch oven, again, is that it's very heavy, so you have to be considerate of how long your trip is going to be and how much weight you guys are going to want to carry. But it is a good option. This is an interesting one. It's the tin can cooking. So basically, if you have any leftover cans from something that you made prior in your trip, you can use a large can and layer meat, vegetables, and seasonings. And again, just kind of sit it in the fire and it'll cook the meal. This is definitely a more like frugal option, but I thought that it was interesting. And I'm sure like a lot of people want to be adventurous when they're camping. So that's definitely a fun one to try. And then direct cooking. So obviously, when you have hot dogs or marshmallows, you're going to put them over the open flame, and that's convenient. It requires the least amount of supplies. All you need is to make your fire and find some sticks, and you can put your food directly on it. So, as with any part of your camping or backpacking trip, you're going to want to make sure that you consider for the chance of inclement weather or weather that could change throughout your trip. And whether you're preparing for just yourself or for everyone in your group, you're going to want to make sure that you do this prior to your trip so that you don't have to worry about it when you're out and it starts raining out of nowhere. So, an important thing that you should do is portion off your meals or the ingredients for your meals and make sure that they are all in water resistant packages or containers. That way, you can layer them in your backpack and you know that they are going to be safe even if it just starts raining or snowing out of nowhere. So, in this case, it's best to use a stove or a grill that's going to have a liquid heat source such as propane rather than depending on a campfire to cook all of your food. It's going to be able to heat without the fire going out as quickly. And then you're also going to want to opt for lighters over matches. Matches can get wet and then they are pretty much dead and will not work. So, for passing rain during travel, even if it's not when you're trying to heat your fire or your heat source right at the moment that you're trying to cook, even when you're walking with your backpack, the matches could get wet, and that would just mean that you're not going to have any source of fire starter. Tarps are also super helpful. They're really inexpensive and don't take up much room, and you can put them up, and it kind of gives you a temporary relief from the rain or snow at long enough to cook your food. You have to make sure that they're high enough so that they don't catch fire, and you want to make sure that you're angling them so that the rain is draining away from your heat source, not directly on top of it. In severe heat, you want to make sure that all of your perishable foods, such as fruits, vegetables, or meat, are properly refrigerated. If you know that you're going hiking or camping in July and don't have a means of keeping that food cold in a cooler, you should probably just stray away from it and go with canned foods and foods that can last long in severe heat. And then in severe cold, you're going to make sure that you have extra fuel because propane acts differently in cold weather. Sometimes you can use up a lot more in cold weather, so you just want to make sure that you have an adequate amount that you're able to cook all of your food. So now I wanted to give you guys a few ideas of meals that you can make on your camping trip and especially in different types of weather. Just keep in mind that your food should always be nourishing and balanced, regardless of if it's hot or cold. You're exerting a lot of energy on your trip, and you're going to want to make sure that you're getting enough calories to stay healthy and able to have fun on your trip. Winter, you want to think warm and hearty, so things like oatmeal and porridge, stews and soups, that stuff that's going to warm you up, it's going to keep you going. And in summer, you're going to want to think opposite and kind of think more energizing and refreshing. So, fresh fruits and vegetables. You don't want anything that's going to make you feel sluggish or feel like you really can't do much walking or any physical activity because it's so hot. Also, things like grilled chicken and hashes. They're just very light, but they're still going to give you enough calories. I just wanted to include seasonal items because I really wanted to get away from the idea that food when you're camping has to be super boring and frugal. Even just like a little bit of pumpkin spice in your oatmeal or s'mores if you're camping in the summer makes the food more exciting and it makes it something that you look forward to doing. And then just to go along with that, being creative when you're cooking, making sure that you bring seasonings. I know that there are stores like REI and Bass Pro Shop that have multi-seasoning containers that have one container that have multiple compartments, and you can just put seasonings that you have at home, such as salt, pepper, chili flakes, whatever it is that the people in your group like. But that way, you're not just eating bland chicken and vegetables and hot dogs. You can actually season your food like you would at home. And then I just said this, but camping doesn't mean that you have to be roughing it or minimalistic. When you have the right fire and the right cookware, it's pretty much the same heat source that you would have as if you were at home. So you don't have to think that just because you're camping, it means that you have to eat like roughage, like outdoor food. And then going back to the basics, obviously that's opposite of what I just said, but sometimes that's the most fun of camping is just like having hot dogs and s'mores and things that you wouldn't normally have when you're back home. So that's not a bad option to consider. So, with hazards and safety, I wanted to make sure that I went into a little bit more detail because safety should always be your number one priority. You never want to put yourself or anyone that you're camping with in a situation that they could get hurt or sick when cooking. And the first and most important would be making sure that you're in a well ventilated area. And this seems like it would be kind of obvious since you're outside, but that doesn't necessarily mean that you are in a well ventilated area. It means that if you're cooking with propane or an alternate heat source, you need to be away from fire. This could cause an explosion or the flames to go up in your face and cause burns. And also making sure that you're keeping all flammable liquids away. So, your extra propane source, you want to make sure that you're keeping that away from your campfire. Make use of a meat thermometer to know that any poultry, fish, or meat that you're eating is cooked through to a safe point. Doesn't have to be charred, but just using this thermometer so that it's cooked at least to like medium rare, you know that you're not going to get sick eating it. And then along with that, I know that you're camping and that it's fun to be outdoors and use kind of what's around you, but you have to be careful with using any wild meat, fruits, and vegetables, or water when you're cooking. They could be poisonous or tainted, and it's just better to kind of steer away from that and use the items that you brought from home and know are safe to eat. Make sure that you're handling all hot items with care. Use pot holders and make sure that all cookware is properly cooled off before you're putting it back in your backpacks or trucks or whatever it is that you're stowing your cookware in. And make sure that all fires are properly put out before leaving your campsite and that all heat sources on your grills or stovetops are turned off before you put those away as well. And then just a few more tips. Doing as much at home prep as possible is super effective. When you're camping and backpacking, you're going to want to be spending time with the people that you're camping with and having fun and spending your time cutting vegetables or meat when you don't really have a surface to do that is just kind of tedious and annoying. So, first ask about allergies and dietary restrictions within your group so that you're not wasting time making things that people in your group can't eat and then just end up carrying them for no reason. Pre cutting all your vegetables and meat and portioning them again is super effective because that way you can just kind of throw it all in a pot and get it cooked really fast. Make sure that you're storing all of your food away from the campsite. Christy's talked about this before, but it's going to keep wild animals away and put you out of danger. Make sure that all the food is safe to eat. Again, if you've been walking for a long time and you've been in the heat or in the rain, you just want to make sure that none of your food is spoiled and that you have a clean water source if you're going to be using water to boil. It's best to let all campfires reduce all the way to ash before leaving a campsite. So you should never just try and like put out a campfire when it was roaring and then leave because it could cause a forest fire. So kind of letting that campfire die down and then through the night when it's actual ash, that's the best time to leave. And then obviously leave no trace. Make sure that you're getting rid of all your garbage and all your food scraps and leaving your campsite cleaner than when you found it. So, this is a very basic guide to cooking in the wilderness. Obviously, there are many things that you can do to make it more fun and make it more customizable to your group and the camp trip that you're going on. But if you utilize these tips and especially keep mind of the hazards and safety precautions, you should have no problem cooking and enjoying your food in the wild.